Welcome back. This is Sean and Noah. We're here this week with Sessions and back as normal at Thursday afternoon. So if you're new here, Sessions is a weekly live stream that we do on YouTube focused on tips and techniques that we're going to bring to you. Today's session is about new user onboarding. So we're going to go through getting out of the box, all the basics of software, and kind of walk you through all that. So let's jump into it. So maybe Goose, pull up the slide deck, and we're going to run through a couple things before we get into specifically new user onboarding. So if you haven't seen us before on Sessions, or you're just getting used to us, let me quickly introduce you to Origin and Workstation. This is the two products we sell, or you can buy them together as the complete system. If we go to the next slide, Goose, you'll see that Origin is a handheld CNC router that allows you to, create really pristine and precise things by hand, where a machine is kind of assisting you as you're creating these. So, there's a lot of things you can do with Origin, and we're going to walk you through a couple real quick before we get into once we get out of the box, so people who haven't seen it before can take a quick look at that. So we can work small. We can engrave stuff like that, or we can work with joinery, and we can build very specific complex joinery, mortise and tenons with unique designs, or more of the classical stuff. A lot of the stuff I'm going to go over here, we've actually done previous sessions on. So for instance, we did a whole on-tool joinery session previously, and you can go watch that after this to get more on that. Another thing that we talk about when we're talking about Origin and Workstation, and if you go to the next one, Goose, is fixtures. So if you're in a wood shop, you're used to creating templates, fixtures, really getting it, your process efficient and usable. And one of the things that really takes a lot of time is making the jigs, making the things that are going to help you build your pieces. So fixturing is a really cool thing to do with Origin, and it really allows you to speed up traditional processes as well as work with traditional tools in a better, faster way. And then I think there's one more we're going to go over real quick, is working on site. So Origin is a portable tool. You can bring it on site. I have some images here of flooring inlays where people are putting inlays into the floor. You see the large musical note to the right, and then also a smaller inlay to the left. These are all kind of things you can do on site. And it really gives you that level of precision that you normally don't have when you're on site.
And just to tag onto that, Sean, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to bring Origin on site. It's completely portable, which means even in your shop, you can bring it to different places. If you've got a piece of furniture that you're working on somewhere that's big and you don't want to have to move it over to a specific machine to work on it, you just pick up Origin, take it where you need it.
Yeah, that's a really powerful thing about taking the tool to the work. All right, so a couple more things let's go over, and let's jump into that new user onboarding. So last slide, Goose. All right, so let's talk about what we're going to get into now. So you've bought Origin, you hopefully bought Workstation with it because it is the complete system, and we're going to walk through what you need to know. So we're going to go over unboxing and safety. We're going to go over kind of getting your work area set up for Origin, because there's a couple new things to know about that. Then we'll go through Origin software basics, design software for creating files for Origin, and then we're going to go over some tips and tricks at the end that are really about related to using Origin for the first few times. So let's go ahead and jump through the next one. All right, so this is what comes in the box with Origin. You have Origin, everything comes ready to go. You basically just need to plug it into power and a vacuum, and you're ready to go. So you get the manual, you get a couple bits to start, some shaper tape, all the tools you need to change the bits, a pouch to put everything in, and the accessory hose. When you're using Origin, it is a router. It generates a lot of dust, but we've done a great job at collecting that, so you don't really have to worry about it. And that's what comes in the box. So you're going to get that out. And one thing to really think about when you're working with Origin is a little bit of safety. So if we head over to the next one, you'll see there's really a couple things we need. So you need to protect your lungs, you need to protect your ears, and you need to protect your eyes. I thought maybe we'd go to my camera real quick and maybe Noah's and just quickly show. So any safety glasses work quite well. I like these WorkTunes Connects. You can listen to some Bluetooth jams while you're working. Noah likes these glasses.
Yeah, these are nice.
Pretty,
they come a little. The other glasses come a little too close to my eyes, and it may be that they don't look cool enough for me, or something like that. I don't know. And then in terms of ear protection, in the studio we have little monitors so that I can hear what Sean's saying, and those protect my ears. But normally I would be wearing something like what Sean's got on, or little foam earplugs to keep my ears safe.
Yeah, and I have my favorite respirator here, which is an Eclipse. If you come over here, Goose, this is just a thing you can buy off Amazon. I like it. It's pretty lightweight, and the filters change out. I don't always wear it when I'm using Origin, but depending on what I'm cutting, how much dust in the air, that's a option you need to decide for your own safety.
And it's, the one thing that is nice if you are using a nice powerful vacuum hooked up to Origin, it's not, unless you're cutting something that's really dangerous to breathe in. Just a regular dust mask is totally adequate, and even without a mask, unless you're going to be going after it for a while, it's generally okay. But yeah, I mean, it's safety's cool, guys.
We're always wearing masks now anyways, so just keep it on while you're using Origin. That's just a few safety pointers to think about. Origin is a pretty safe device in general. We see a lot of kids and people getting into it quickly, so don't worry about any of that super much, but protect your eyes. It is a router. Things are flying around sometimes, and you'll be safe. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so now you've gotten Origin in your workshop, and you need to think about, okay, what do I need to start working with this? So there's a couple things that I think are really key to point out. One, obviously you want a really stable table. Like any woodworking, the more stable the table, the better. You're going to be pushing around on it, moving stuff. Just try to get something surface and stable. Next one is dust extraction. It is basically required with Origin. You really want to be collecting the dust as it comes out. If you don't, you're going to have a lot of problems. So, if you have a really nice dust extractor, for instance, like a Festool, those collect almost every bit of dust. You won't really ever have to worry. If you have something smaller, like an old shop vac, you might want to think about upgrading, but you can always use that, but just know it might not collect everything.
But any dust collector is better than nothing. It's really important, especially we'll go over kind of how Origin works in a little bit, and it'll make more sense. But it's really important that you get dust collection on there for a multitude of reasons. So whatever you have lying around, that adapter hose that comes in the box is meant to hook up to the kind of standard sizes for shop vac and other similar kind of job site vacuums. And then Origin also hooks up to the European standard extractor hose as well.
Yeah. Okay. One thing about dust extraction, maybe to go over quickly, is if you do have a Festool vac, they have Bluetooth power on and off now, and while you're using Origin, that really becomes a nice feature.
Yeah.
Having to bend down every time you make a cut can be a little bit tedious.
You can show my overhead camera. I can show that button here. So this button right here actually turns my vacuum on and off, which is really handy. So that's just a little Bluetooth guy with a coin cell battery in it. The battery, I don't think I've ever changed a battery on any one of these buttons, and they're just awesome. It's a great thing to have on your Festool vac if you don't already have one of those. They make their new ones come with the Bluetooth capability built into it. Their old CT 26 and up have a retrofit kit that you can buy. That's what's on this guy right now, and it's awesome. Such a good little
I got the retrofit
investment.
And I can't go back.
Yeah.
Once you get it, it's game over.
That's it.
So,
yeah.
Okay, so all right, so next up we want to go over. All right, so you're going to need some spoil board. This is really just whatever you're cutting through, you want something under it so you don't end up with small cuts all through a table. So if you get a 1/2 inch MDF, a 2 foot by 4 foot for bigger stuff, or even smaller stuff for the workstation. The workstation actually comes with kind of a built-in spoil board, so you don't have to worry about that. But you're going to be cutting through the entire thing. The bit's going to cut through what's underneath. The spoiler board will keep that from messing up your table. And then, obviously measuring supplies and finishing supplies. So let's quickly jump to Noah's camera, and maybe he's going to show you a couple of cool things, and I have a couple as well.
Totally. So maybe we can cut over to this detail cam, Goose. So this is a just standard off of Amazon set of digital calipers. You can pick up a decent set for about $20 or $30, and with digital fabrication, regardless of the machine, and Origin being a digital fabrication machine, it counts in there. You really want to own a set of calipers. Just for laziness, I tend to like the digital calipers, and like I said, the starting price is quite inexpensive for those at this point, or you can go all out and get some really fancy machinist ones, but it's really not necessary for woodworking. Or if you're a dial caliper kind of person, that's also great. You really just want to be able to know down in the sort of thousandths of an inch territory, 10,000ths of an inch territory where things are in the real world, because it's we are working at those levels of precision, and a tape measure really can't get you there. So calipers are great. These are just a standard 6-inch set. You can get 12-inch sets. You can get massive ones too. But if you're going to be working on bigger stuff, those the 12-inch calipers is also a great thing to think about picking up a set of. So like I said, really important to know what you're working with. The other things that I generally recommend you have around, we can cut back to this detail. We can just leave it there, Goose. I'll go through a few things. So this is double-sided tape. And we actually sell this on the Shaper store now, but this is a brand of tape that we have been using for years in the Shaper workshop. It's really thin. You can see if I just kind of pull that off. It's very, very thin. It's a paper substrate instead of the foam style stuff that's like carpet tape or VHB. That's not going to work for machining, but this double-sided tape is amazing, and you should definitely pick a roll up from the store. Shaper tape.
Yeah, the double-sided tape really can become like a really nice way to fix your stuff quickly and easily with Origin. So if you don't have double-sided tape, I would almost say that's a must-buy. Yep.
Yeah, agreed. We tend to use that stuff a lot for just all sorts of things, but just generally, you can think of double-sided tape sort of as a clamp in your arsenal. It really is that strong. And so especially for holding on to smaller stuff or delicate stuff or stuff you don't want to mar with a clamp, really the sky's the limit. It's really useful to have it around. So I can't stress enough how valuable that is as a tool in your workshop. So Shaper tape comes with 2 rolls in the box. You can always pick more up in the store, but those 2 rolls are going to see you through quite a while. So unless you're working on, say, like we looked earlier, like on a big floor project or a giant, multiple sheets of plywood project, the rolls that came in the box are going to be sufficient for quite a while. But you can always get more at shapertools.com.
And if you picked up Workstation when you bought Origin, a lot of the learning can be done on Workstation as you're getting to know the machine and the software. So really, you can just reuse you're not reusing tape on Workstation, right? That's a surface that you don't ever have to retape. So you don't have to worry about tape if you're practicing and working on the Workstation.
Yeah, totally. And we'll go through that here in a second. But if you did pick up a Workstation, this hex wrench will look familiar to you. If you didn't, this is the hex wrench that comes with Workstation. Origins is a little shorter, but it's effectively the same thing. It's a 4mm hex wrench. And then this is the 19mm spanner or open-ended wrench that came with Origin. And this is together how you more or less make any adjustment with Origin or Workstation is with these 2 tools. So make sure you keep those close by while you're working. And like I said, they are included in the tool bag that you get with Origin.
Yep.
The one last thing here, and I kind of skipped this. If you don't already have something like this, this is made by a company called Titan. But Jake has our product specialist. Jake likes to just take a putty knife and take it to the grinder and put an edge on it. for peeling stuff up, but you really want something you can scrape underneath and pick up pretty well when you're using double-sided tape, because it's really quite sticky. So some little spatula or pry bar or something that you feel comfortable at getting underneath the work that you're doing and getting it up without doing too much damage to the workpiece. Really important to have that when you're dealing with double-sided tape, and there's lots of options there. You just want to make sure it's something that's good for delicate work. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then the last thing.
And then
here,
I have a couple.
Oh yeah. I was just going to quickly, Sean, go through the 3 bits that come as standard. Just quickly talk through those guys.
Yeah, go ahead. That'd be good. Yep.
So these 3 guys here are the 3 bits that come with Origin. So we've got in the middle we have a 1/4 inch by 3/4 inch length of cut 2 flute end mill. And that guy, so the length of cut, we have a whole session actually on cutters, so that would be probably interesting to you if you want to learn a little bit more about cutters. There's a lot of them out in the world. Origin just uses it comes as standard with a 1/4 inch collet, so any bit with a 1/4 inch collet you can run, and there's just the sky's the limit there, really. This guy is a 1/8 inch end mill by 1/2 inch length of cut. So again, the length of cut is how deep you can cut with this bit. So it can only cut down to 1/2 inch. And again, 1/4 inch shank. And then this guy is the engraving bit that comes with Origin. And we use this both for engraving text and designs. And this comes in really handy when you're doing grid work, which we'll look at quickly as a stylus. And that'll make more sense when we talk about it a little bit later on. But those are the 3 bits that come in the box with Origin, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of feeds and speeds and care for your bits later on. But these 3 bits ought to set you straight for a good amount of time. But this is definitely a consumable you're going to want to pick up a few more of. I'd say before you pick up shaper tape, you probably are going to want to pick up at least 1 of each the 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch cutters. The engraving bit, it really lasts a long time. I don't really see any reason, unless you drop it and break it, or it really is starting to feel dull, that you should replace that one or feel worried about it. But the 1/4 and 1/8 definitely are something that you want to use sharp. So either have them sharpened, which they're not really all that expensive as far as end mills go, so I just generally pick up new ones. But if you have a local sharpening shop that'll do it for you, just make sure that they're able to grind to the precision that you are going to be working in.
Yep, totally. Yeah, and then Goose, I had a couple other little ones to go over. So 3 things that I like to have. One is a small sander, just to kind of buff the edges off the top. When you're getting cut, sometimes it'll look like it's not clean, but it's just pulling off the top. So being able to hit that quickly. 2 is a small detail sander. This is a thing I found on Amazon, which allows you to get in there to real tight areas and just kind of clean up. And then 3 is a little brush just to clean out your engravings while you're cutting, so you can kind of see how the cut's actually showing up. So, and I think the one in the middle is called Gator Finishing, I believe. It's a nice little small detail sander. So, okay, so that's kind of a good little, stuff, the basics that you need to get started. Obviously, there's a lot more things that you'll find, but that's pretty good for now. So let's go ahead and go back to the slides, Goose. All right, and then the last thing to talk about is fixturing. We talked about double-sided tape. Clamps are obviously really important. Maybe Noah can go and show the workstation clamps quickly.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go ahead and cut actually down to the workstation camera, Goose. So you can see on the workstation right now I have a little piece of material mounted up. Yeah, I mean, the basic idea here is these are just kind of standard T-slot cantilever clamps. These 2 of these ship with Workstation, so they're in that toolkit, and you can actually use them in both directions. I think in this particular case, I am using them kind of. I would probably flip them around, but you just want to make sure that where the T-track bolt lines up with a track in the clamping face of Workstation. It's really important, and it's easy. There's this sort of slot where the shelf slides, and it's easy to get sometimes the clamps caught up in that the sort of little intersection between the vertical and the horizontal. You can see it maybe a little bit better on this side. So I'm talking about these areas. Just look out that your clamp doesn't you're not trying to tighten it in these areas because it won't work very well. So you can tighten it from either side. Just make sure that gives you a little bit of freedom to move around how the clamps are. So that is the basic set of clamps that comes with Workstation. This is a standard T-track, I believe. Now I'm going to screw up on what the standard is, but I believe that it's built to support both the prevailing standards in the US. So it should be okay to go ahead and buy most any T-track accessories that you have, that you can find at, say, like Rockler or Woodcraft or your local supply house. Any of their T-track accessories generally tend to work in Workstation, and there's lots of cool clamps out there for different situations. The other clamps that work well, and I'll just go ahead and grab one of those to show you guys, is these Festool F-style clamps. So if we cut back to the Workstation, we actually designed it specifically to be able to be used with these guys as well. And this works really nicely for say, doing this tenon work. It just gives you really, really sturdy clamping. So I really like to use those guys. If you have any lying around, they work beautifully with Workstation.
Yeah, and quick release clamps work with it as well, which are more my favorite.
Yes,
I really like those.
I think our only set of those is what's holding my work down to the table right now, so I can't show you those. But essentially the same style, just with a sort of lever and release ratcheting mechanism rather than a screw.
Yep. Yeah, and even if you didn't get Workstation when you bought Origin, you're going to need those clamps to be able to attach the top surface to your tabletop while you're working on projects, so something to think about. Okay, all right, so I think we're going to move on from the setup period into the software. So Goose, if we head back to the slides. Okay, so let's quickly go over, this is kind of what the basic UI of Origin looks like. Now, what you're going to see is on the right side of the screen, there's 3 or 4 kind of buttons. There's a top button, which is settings. This is where you set up your profile, your Wi-Fi, your language, all that kind of stuff. And then there's actually 3 main modes on the right side: scan mode, design mode, and cut mode. And when we're thinking about projects with Origin and software, really you can just think of, you're going to do each of these steps all the time. You're always going to scan, then you're going to design, then you're going to cut. So if you start thinking about that now, it'll be really easy once you're in your workshop trying to get ready. Now, we're going to ignore the left bar right now because that's going to change based on the mode you're in. But I think we're going to jump over to Noah's tool and kind of start walking you through the process of getting started with this from kind of start.
So if we can, see the tool camera here. So this is the screen of the Origin that we've got here in the studio. And basically what I want to walk you guys through here is the kind of workflow that you should be expecting to do pretty much every time you pick up a project with Origin. So on the right hand side of the screen, you can see there's 3 buttons: scan, design, and cut. Actually 4, there's settings, but we'll ignore that for the moment. So scan, design, cut, that's your mantra. Those are the 3 steps that you're going to take every time you take Origin to a project. More or less, you're going to need to take those steps to get things done. So we'll start with scanning. And Sean, let me know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I'll just go ahead and dive in if that's okay.
This is great.
Okay. So so basically, every time you select one of these buttons on the right-hand side, that's a mode. Okay, so that's sort of an overall operating mode that you've put Origin into, and that's going to change what shows up over here on the left-hand side. Okay, so in scan mode, we've got 3 buttons here: new scan, add to scan, and workspaces. So let's quickly go through what each of those does. So new scan is creating a scan of a workspace, and what that looks like here, and actually, Goose, if we want to just jump over into the top view. We'll just show you here. This is kind of fun. Our friend Sam made this really awesome little visual aid. So this is the kind of effective camera view that the camera that's facing out on Origin has, and this is how it tracks its position in the world. This camera in conjunction with shaper tape. And the step of sort of how you get Origin used to the world is scanning. So you're essentially using the camera that's on board on Origin to tell it about the world. So we're going to go back over to Workstation here, and we're going to create a new scan. And when I tap on New Scan, you'll notice I get a couple of buttons down here. And one thing that's important to note, if we cut over to my top view here, Goose, those buttons relate to the buttons that are actually on the physical handles of Origin itself, okay? And that's why the buttons have the little color codes on the screen as well. So the orange button on the left is generally kind of cancel or back or stop, and the green button on the right is generally start or next or advance to something. So you can go ahead and cut back to the screen, Goose. I just wanted to illustrate that. So anytime one of these buttons shows up on the screen, you can kind of use it interchangeably, either by tapping the screen or by tapping the button on the handle. So now we are in a scan mode, and you can see on the screen I'm actually building up the map that Origin is going to use to work with this workstation setup that I have right now. So right now I've got just a piece of 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch hickory in here that we're going to look at cutting a quick tenon into. And I've got my whole area kind of scanned. I can see all of the area that I care about. And so at this point, I can just go ahead and click Finish, or again, the green button on the handle. And it's going to take a moment here to process this scan. Once the scan is created, I'm now sort of inside of this world, and this dot here in the center of the screen, that dot is the actual dead center of the bit. So right down the middle of the router. So that's really actually quite amazing to be able to see sort of in close detail exactly what's going on sort of at the business end of the router. So and we'll go over a couple of other things on that later, but basically we've got a scan created now, and if you double tap anywhere on the screen, you can actually zoom in and out, and you can see there's some areas that you can't see my hand in. That's because that's part of the pre-recorded workspace image that we made when we scanned, and then you can actually see what Origin is seeing live. And so what it's doing is comparing what it sees live with that original scan that we made, and that's how it knows where it is in the world. So we can just tap again to zoom in. So, and what you'll notice as well, after I create that scan, Origin automatically moved me into design mode. And design mode is sort of the interstitial step between creating a space and being able to actually cut something in that space. So we've told Origin sort of about the world that it's going to be working in. Now we need to tell it what it's going to work on, and that's the design step. So maybe, Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about designing for Origin?
Yeah, that sounds good. So, there's a couple of things now that we've made the scan. We need to get the file into Origin. So there's a couple ways to do that. We can use software on the device to go straight without a computer into cutting. We can upload files to ShaperHub that we've created on our own computer, and then we can also use files that other people have created to add to our Origin and start there. So Noah, why don't you walk through on-tool design, because I think for new users that's a really good thing to start with.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So on-tool design is one of the things that we really think sets Origin really massively apart from any other kind of digital fabrication tool. Hello. Camera 2. And so what's important to know here is that you can do actually anything from just a simple little task to a full-blown furniture project without ever touching a computer. And it's really kind of something that we hold dear, something that we think is really important, and why we've made Origin the way that we have. Because there's a couple reasons. One, we want to make it easy for as easy as possible to get a project done. If you don't have to get into making a file, doing design work on a computer, that's great. More the better. If it's really just like creating simple shapes, there's really no reason to touch a computer. So there's already a computer on your router. Why not just use that? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. What we're going to do is, again, in design mode, we're going to take a look at the left-hand side. So this is always where you're going to find sort of the actions in that mode. And we want to go to Create. So this is our On-Tool CAD menu. And what we've got here is a few different functions that we're going to look at today. And we're just going to start quickly with just a basic circle here, okay? So all the items on here should be relatively self-explanatory. We'll try and go through them, but we're just going to start with a circle, okay? So when I open up the circle tool, you can see now there's a new option here, and I can specify a diameter. So I just tap on diameter, and if I want to make a circle that's 3 inches in diameter, just go ahead and hit 3 inches and done. You can see I've now got a circle on my screen that's in place mode. So design mode has a sort of secondary little bit of a mode inside of it where you're actually able to place shapes down in your work area. Okay, and this circle is attached to origin right now, but as soon as I press the green button to place it, it's now anchored to my workspace. So I can't move it anymore. I can sort of operate on it. I can copy it or remove it with these buttons down here, but that's sort of anchored digitally to my workspace. So now there's a 3-inch circle that's placed down, and that sort of is a little bit of an abstract thing here. But let's go ahead and move over quickly to my my plywood here, so I can actually cut into some stuff. So the one step that we're missing here that we wanted to show you quickly is just, so when we made that scan on Workstation, Workstation has shaper tape pre-applied. So this comes pre-applied to Workstation. More or less, it's very durable, and more or less you don't ever have to worry about that. It's always going to be there. It's going to be accurate. It's sort of a just fire and forget, sort of a thing. That's why we designed it that way. But if you're working somewhere that doesn't have shaper tape applied to it, that's why it also comes in a roll. So if you want to go top down here, Eric. So I'm just going to throw a couple of pieces of tape down, and you want to space them, 3 or so inches apart, these rows. You don't have to be super careful about making them straight. It's okay if they're a little bit off like that. That's no big deal. They don't need to be really, kind of carefully aligned to one another. That's not how Origin operates. It's okay if there's a little bit of sloppiness in there. You just want to make sure.
But maybe for the
sure.
I was going to say, well, maybe for the new users, one of the really important parts about tape is it being very flat. So you don't want to put it on cut boards, and you don't want it to have it on different levels, because
True.
That will confuse Origin.
True. Different levels is definitely, so tape on multiple levels is a no-no. So if I were to, just as an example, if I were to put tape down here, kind of a half an inch above this plywood, onto my table, that really wouldn't work very well, because the tape would then be on multiple planes, and Origin is not gonna. It's just gonna refuse the tape that it sees on a different plane. It's not gonna be useful to you. The other thing is, if I try and hold this up to you, if you can see when I pull on the tape, I can sort of make it warp, and so it's really easy when you're laying this down to sort of like make tape in an arc, sort of an arc shape. Sort of like, not exactly straight. I'm not doing a good job demonstrating here, but if you pull on shaper tape too hard while you're laying it down, it can bow, and that's also not good. So you just generally want to make sure that it's sort of on the flattest surface that you can have it, and that you apply it just rolling it nice and gradually off of the roll and sticking it down so that you don't introduce too much distortion. But generally, you don't have to worry about it too much, but there are certain situations where that can definitely cause you some heartache. So that's one place to look when you're troubleshooting an issue. Is it's not uncommon for sort of a poor tape setup to be the culprit of something that's causing you problems. So a poor tape setup will degrade the quality of your scan, and by extension the quality of the cuts that you're making. So make sure that you take a little bit of time, read, and we've got some good articles on our help center about taping. We, I believe, have an upcoming session about taping and scanning. So just it's something that you do want to pay attention to, but don't stress out too much over it. It's good to learn and good to always test things out as best you can before you're cutting into something really valuable, expensive hardwood or any like heirloom furniture you're trying to restore. Make sure that you're confident that it's going to work by testing it beforehand, so you know that your setup is okay. Okay, so now I've got tape applied. Let's go ahead and scan that in as well. So I'm just going to tap back to scan here, and new scan. You can make as many scans as you want, which is awesome. So we're just going to go ahead and get this all set up. I'm not going to scan all the way down because I've got a camera so that you guys can see. It's sort of blocking my way on the bottom, but we'll go ahead and get that scanned. And you can see now I've got a place that I can actually work and actually cut here, so that's great. And what's kind of neat is, like I said, you can make as many of these scans as you want, and you can manage them in the Workspaces folder, which we'll be able to take a look at here in a little bit. So back to design. We're going to go ahead and go into Create. We're going to grab our circle tool. We're going to grab 3 inches again. And now I can actually go ahead and cut. So you can see I want to maybe place the center of the circle right on top of that knot. And what's really neat, actually, and in place mode, you can pinch to zoom, so you can kind of see what you're doing. You can kind of visually place here. And what's really powerful about visual placement is, say, for instance, you're doing like a bow tie or a series of bow ties on a checked piece of lumber. And really what you're trying to do is lay those out visually, to an aesthetically pleasing way. And you can do that by just looking on the screen, taking your bow tie profile, comparing it to where it is in the world, and laying it down. So, but circle for now. We want to cut a 3-inch circle in this so that we can set a piece of hardware into it, let's say. We're going to place it down. And now, because we don't know when you're done designing, it doesn't automatically go into cut mode. So we're going to go ahead and advance into cut mode now. So this is the last mode. And what we're going to do is a couple things. We're going to set up all of the parameters for our cut. So again, left-hand side is kind of all of the actions that you can take in cut mode. And these are all of the cut settings. So I'll just start from the top. The topmost setting is depth. So if I tap on this guy, this is how I'm going to set how deep I'm going to cut. So I'd like to cut down. Let's cut down 1/8 of an inch. You can see there's sort of these quick fractions on the side. By the way, if you're someone of the metric persuasion, you can actually switch. This is pro tip. You can switch the whole machine. If you go into the settings tab here, you can switch the whole machine with this little switch over here from inch to metric and back again. So if you want to work in metric, you can switch the whole machine over to it, but you can also mix units. So I could cut down 2 millimeters. Oops. 2 millimeters. And that's just going to go ahead and convert from metric to inch for me here, you can see. Anyway, that's just a little aside. We're going to go back to 1/8 of an inch. The next setting down is the cut type. So with a closed shape, which a circle is a closed shape, any of these cut types is available. If you're using a line of any kind that isn't closed, it's really only going to work with online. So that's just worth knowing here. But since this shape is closed, we can do any of these shapes, or any of these cut types rather. And I'm going to go ahead and cut, let's say, on the outside of the line. So it'll swap. So cut outside. And let me just go down here. We'll keep going through. The bit diameter is set a little small, so it's hard to see what's going on. We'll get to that in 1 second. But the next down, this is offset. And you can see actually when I open up the particular item on this menu, it'll actually tell you what it is. So depth, for instance, instead of the icon. So just click on anything. If you're confused, just click on it, and it'll tell you in English what, or your language of choice, it'll tell you what it is. So go ahead and if you select any of these offsets, and let me go ahead and skip ahead to the diameter, because offset will become more apparent when I do that as well. But essentially, that's how you add additional wiggle room or make something smaller. So it's just a way to quickly adjust the sizes and fitting of your project. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next down, which is bit size, which is diameter. So you're going to want to go ahead and select the diameter of your bit, and right now we've got a 1/4 inch bit chucked up in here. So I'm going to click on 1/4 inch, and you can see I get a little warning error that says don't forget to Z-touch after changing bits. So Z-touch is the way that Origin actually senses where the tooltip is. So every time you change the bit and pull the spindle in and out, the end of your end mill is actually going to move around just a little bit. And it's really important that we know where the end of the end mill is, because that's 0. So everything is relative to the end of that end mill. And so when I click on Z-touch, Eric, let's go ahead and look at the bench cam. Let's see, if I get a little closer, maybe I can take this guy off. You can see in there, and we can watch the bit. So if I hit Z-touch, see the bit goes down, touches the surface, and let's watch the Z-touch one more time from the screen. So I can actually just manually Z-touch. I don't have to wait for that little error message or warning message to come up. I can just go ahead and touch the Z-touch button below the bit diameter button and Z-touch. And you can see when I get that little green check on the screen, it means it's registered, it's done its thing, and you're good to go. Let's just quickly circle back to, put my guard back on. Let's just quickly circle back to inside and outside cut, because now I've got the bit is a little wider. You can see this gray path right here is actually the bit diameter. So if I were to change that to 1/8 of an inch, you can see it's going to get narrower. You can always dismiss the Z-touch if you've already done one. We're going to go back to 1/4 of an inch. You can see that's giving you a preview of what you're actually going to cut. So if I were to change this to an inside cut, that's going to swap that over to the inside of my line. So cutting on the exterior or the interior of your profile is what inside and outside cut means. So we're going to go ahead and go back to outside cut. And then the offset, I'm just going to put a really big one on here. I'm going to go ahead and go like 1/2 inch so you can see what it does. So you can see it moves this bit path out by 1/2 of an inch from the edge of this circle that I've made, right? So that's offsetting a positive 1/2 inch. I can also offset a negative 1/2 inch, and that's going to take me down to the inside. So offsets, and we'll talk more about offsets, or we talk more about offsets rather in a lot of other sessions. So go back through the archive, especially in joinery. Offsets are really important for dialing in fit, but also just when you're cutting generally, I like to do a rough and finish pass. So I'll generally put like 50 thousandths of an inch offset, do my depth passes, and then on my last and final pass, I just go to 0, and that gives you probably the best edge quality that you're going to get, just because you're not going to leave sort of witness lines at every depth that you cut. It's really important with routers to not try and cut through too much at once. So we generally say the rule of thumb is cut no deeper than the diameter of your bit. So in this case, that's like 1/4 of an inch. We're within that. But if you're cutting something that's 3/4 of an inch, then you'd be cutting in 3 depth passes, if that makes sense. So let's go ahead and make some sawdust. I'll shut up now and just turn this router on. So safety first, glasses on, and I'm just going to switch the router on. I'm going to dial my setting on the router spindle speed to 4, and I like to start slow on spindle speed. And this is where I was saying I was going to circle back on bit care. The one thing that is really easy to do is run your spindle too quickly and burn your material and the bit. And when you do that, you end up actually building up kind of gunk on the tip of the bit, and it makes it dull, and it makes it cut poorly. So it's actually kind of counterintuitive, but you're going to get better cutting results potentially by running the spindle speed slower. So faster is not always better. What I like to do is start around 3 or 4, and then sort of feel if it feels right. If it's cutting smoothly, don't touch it. If you smell burning, turn the speed down. If it's feeling really hard to push through the material, you can potentially turn the speed up, but it may be that your just bit is getting dull. If you know there's a fresh bit in there, then modulate the speed. But it's if the bit is old, turning the spindle speed up isn't going to make it cut better. It's a dull bit. It's just not ever going to cut well. And the other thing too is that it's possible to clean a bit off after you've burned it. So if you accidentally burn a bit, pick up some blade and bit cleaner for yourself, clean it off. Because if you clean it off, it actually will keep cutting nicely for you. But if you leave it dirty and keep using it, it's gonna dull. So just be mindful of that, and don't always be a speed demon with the spindle speed settings. So let's go ahead and switch the spindle on. I'm gonna go ahead and switch the vacuum on, and Sean might be able to talk over me while I do this cut because it'll be a little loud on this end.
Perfect. Okay, so Noah, all he did was, we set the depth. We have the outside set with a 0 offset and a 1/4-inch bit, and you'll see moving around the entire. You really just want to keep the big circle, the big white circle in the middle, right on the line. And what you'll notice is there's a little dot that kind of travels on the path that you're cutting, and keeping that towards the center of the crosshairs will help. If you go outside the line, obviously origin will retract for you. Keep you from work, but you're just slowly moving through at a very constant if you can do it. And when you get to the end, kind of slow down a little bit, because when you hit that empty, it's really going to kind of go through it. So when you get towards the end and you see the blues about to match, slow down a little bit, and you'll make a nice clean cut.
So Goose, if you want to cut over to the detail camera here so we can see what's going on, you can see we've got now, I'm going to go ahead and peel this shaper tape up. See, we have that 3-inch circle cut 1/8 inch deep. Just want to get this out of the way so you guys can see it. Okay, so as Sean mentioned, having some sandpaper around is always a good idea. I don't. I mean, I do over in the other side of the shop here, but we'll just keep going. This fuzz that you guys see here may be a little bit difficult. I can kind of zoom in or move this around just to see what's going on here. This fuzz right here, that's just the fibers in the wood, and it's actually fairly easy to get rid of that fuzz just with a little bit of fine sandpaper. You don't need to go too coarse with it. You can see how easy that was to just make a deadly accurate circle. And the whole time Origin was looking out for me. So all I do in my job, if we want to cut over to the screen, I'll just go ahead and go into air cut mode here, which means I don't need to run the spindle, but I can demo what's going on, is as I move Origin around the toolpath, which is that dotted line that's marching, as long as I keep the toolpath within that larger white circle on the screen, Origin's going to be constantly moving the router around to correct for my error. And as soon as I go outside, it's actually going to retract the bit. So it's difficult to screw it up. You certainly, if you really aggressively go outside of a cut area, and especially if you're cutting quite deep, you can leave a little bit of a nick. But generally, you're going to get a feel for how to cut with Origin. And the only kind of the best advice I give on that is just really try and give it as smooth of an input as you can. Be really intentional and gradual with what you do. Try not to throw it around too much, because that's not sort of the way that Origin is built to correct. It's built to correct sort of more gradually, less radically. If you're really throwing the whole thing around, you're going to leave a poor cut the cut quality is not going to be what you're looking for. But if you sort of treat it very gingerly and cut around the path in a very consistent way, it's going to leave just an absolutely perfect cut. So, Sean, do we want to keep on going? Do we want to do grid and talk about using Workstation to cut a tenon, or would you like to talk about something else?
Yeah, let's do that. I think that'd be really good, because I think there's we should go over grid. It's really important with how you align your files to the material. So let's just jump over to that.
Sounds good. Okay, so let's wander over to my screen here, because I want to show you a little magic thing that Origin does when we move from one workspace to another. So we're going to go ahead and wander back over to Workstation. You can see I got a little pop-up over here that says, oh, looks like you're in a new workspace. Would you like to switch over to that? And in fact, I would, because we scanned that earlier in the session. Now you can see I'm right back where we were, which is awesome. And it means that you can kind of move Origin between different projects in your workshop and easily switch between them. In case you're wondering how to sort of manage workspaces, it's under Scan, Workspaces. And now you can actually go through, search, organize, rename, see all of the workspaces that have ever been made on your machine, and kind of, like I said, rename, delete, organize them. Okay. So we're in our scan, and you can see this is the top of this piece of hickory that I'd like to cut a tenon on. And it's really important, obviously, that the tenon be centered on that piece of material. So I'm going to go ahead and go into design. Actually, I'm just going to take one quick aside here, because I think this is really important, especially for those of you that picked a workstation up. Let's go ahead and cut to the workstation front camera. Let's see if we can see this here. So I'm gonna take my support bar right here, okay, and maybe the top view, Eric, would show this. I'm actually going to clip it on. There's these neat little features in the workstation, and you can look at your manual to see a little bit more info about this. You can actually put the support bar in those features, and it acts as an in-stop up here for your work, so you get that really dead-on level with the top of your workstation. So when you're clamping everything in, you put that guy on there, and then it's really easy, because then you've got your alignment pins on the left side of the material. You've got your in-stop on the top. You just push it into those 3 points, get it clamped in, and it's going to be aligned perfectly. It's definitely a lot harder without this little support bar helper to get things aligned nicely to the top. So thank you for humoring my aside there. I think it's important, though. And one thing also, Eric, I don't know if we can see this. Maybe you can zoom out a little bit on the top view. Just show you roughly on placement of the support bar. Or is that all the way zoomed out? Maybe all the way zoomed out. Well, anyway, need to adjust that camera, but oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, okay, look at that. Okay, so as you can see, the support bar slides on these arm tracks, and that allows you to adjust it any way you need to suit the project that's in there. But you want to be careful that you leave enough room in between what you're working on and the support bar. And actually, we have a perfect example of that here in the studio. If you look at the detail camera, this is what can happen if you get your bit too close to your workstation. You'll be milling aluminum, and you don't want to do that. I think Sean did that. I'm going to blame Sean.
I may have done that a couple times.
Yeah, so you want to leave
it's at least... It's a good thing you're telling everyone.
Yeah, well, I always like to throw Sean under the bus whenever possible. So I like to at least leave myself a couple of bit diameters worth in between my work and the support bar, so that doesn't happen. Anyway, back to grid. So in design mode, we looked at create to create the circle, and the other options in there. If we have time, we'll go over them. But you should just get in there and play with them. They should be relatively self-explanatory. But grid is really important, and it's a feature that not a lot of people know about, and it's confusing to a lot of people. So I think it's worth spending some time on right now. So grid is kind of one of the most amazing third-party pieces of Origin, aside from the on-tool design where we can make our files right on board. Grid is right up there and in line with important features that Origin has, and that's because it allows you to align Origin to real-world stock. So Origin, it lives in a digital world, and all it really cares about is things inside the computer, but we care about the intersection, between, the Venn diagram where the real world meets the computer, right? And Grid is really the most important tool in our tool belt for that. So if we go back to the screen camera, when I click on New Grid, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to see this kind of set of instructions. Okay, so we actually revamped this was it in the last software release, Sean?
Yeah, a couple releases ago.
Okay, yeah, so to make this a little bit easier for everybody, so hopefully that helps. But basically, what we want to do here, and I think we should be able to see this from the workstation camera, if I lower the bit, you can see it's going to come down right there. Yeah, so hopefully that's relatively visible. We're looking right here where this bit lowered down, and you can see it's actually touching, or now it's able to touch the piece of material that I'm working on. So I'm going to click this button that says Set Depth, and I'm using just the regular cutter here, the regular 1/4 inch cutter, but in the instruction manual it tells you to use the engraving bit turned upside down. So you basically just get a 1/4 inch pin. That's the best way to do it. For time's sake, I'm not going to change the bit out, but if you really want to get a good result, go ahead and take the time to swap the 1/4 inch or swap the engraving bit in upside down to do your grid, and then swap back to whatever cutter you're going to be milling with. So you can see on the screen, it's telling us to confirm that the bit size is correct, which it is, 1/4 inch, and that's important because Origin doesn't know what bit is in the spindle right now, and it's really important that we know exactly what the size of the bit is, because we're using that as a way to probe the edge of what we're working on. And so basically what we want to do is we're going to make 3 probes. So the first 2 probes are going to make a line, and everything that we place after that is going to be parallel to that line. So I'm going to very gently, if you switch back to the workstation camera, I'm going to very gently press the bit up against the front face of the material, really gently. I'm not applying pressure here, just I'm moving Origin forward until I just feel it stop against the wood. I don't want to apply pressure because that's going to muck up our reading. So I'm going to go ahead and click probe 1. Now you can see on the screen it switches to 2, and it's showing me that I'm drawing a line between the first point and the second point. Okay, so that's our parallel line, and that's the basis for our grid. The whole grid is going to be parallel to this line. So I'm just doing, if we go to the workstation cam again, you can see it's aligning now with sort of the left-hand side of my tenon, and I'm pushing it up against there again just until it stops and no further, not applying pressure, to make my second probe. And now we're into our third point, and you can see this has changed a little bit now. This is a perpendicular line that is being drawn on the screen for the third point, and that perpendicular line is where the grid's origin point is going to be. It's 0, 0. It's sort of point of truth, and we want to make that right on the top corner. We want to make this corner right here of our material our 0, 0 point for our grid, and we do that by just touching against the perpendicular side of our stock and making a third point. Before I do that, though, you can see actually if I wanted to do something in the middle, I could totally do that. You can see the line actually switches to the middle, or probe on the opposite side. It's okay to probe on any point, whether it's somewhere in the middle or on the left-hand side or right-hand side of stock. That was a change that was made with all of these updates to the grid tool. So if you didn't know that, now you do, and you can actually swap here as well if auto mode isn't working for you. But auto mode's pretty great. Thanks, Sean, for that, and Sam. So probe 3, and now you can see I've got a grid set up on my material exactly dead on this corner. So that's my 0, 0 point, and I know now when I place anything down that that point is going to be my source of truth. So the one last thing that I like to do, especially if I'm cutting on square stock, this is a no-brainer, is I want to go back into grid, and instead of clicking new, I'm going to click on modify. And I could do this before when I was starting grid, but I just want you to know that you can change the size of the grid at any point. You don't have to, you're not locked into that size when you create it. You don't have to go creating a new grid every time you want to change its size. You can change it as many times as you want. So I am going to make a grid that is the size of my tenon divided by 2. So it's 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. So I'm going to go 1.5 inches. And actually, this is a calculator, so I'm just going to go divided by 2. That's 3/4 of an inch. But, in case it was a more complicated little bit of math, that's really handy to have the calculator. And now what I've got is I've got a point that's right in the middle of my tenon. This is all going to start to make sense as soon as I try and place something down to cut. So I want to cut a square. I'm going to go into create. I'm going to go into rectangle. And we're going to make this 1.25 by 1.25. And we're going to put a radius on the corners of 1/4 inch. So this is, you can see, oops, 1.25. And then the last thing that's important here is the anchor point. We're going to cut it on center. So, or place it on center rather. So I've got now this square that's the size of my tenon. And you can see it's placing right on the top of the material. Now, and you can see as I move origin around, that thing's staying stuck right in the center. And that's the power of setting the grid up so you have a center point like that. It's really easy because otherwise it'll just, if you have a grid that's a little too small, it might be hard to see what you're doing. But always take a look up in the readout on the top edge of the screen here to show you what grid point you're currently aligned to. And right now I'm at 3/4 by 3/4, which is great. If I were to turn the grid off, which I can do using this button, you can see now we're back in freeform place mode. And I can sort of just place this anywhere I want. But as soon as I turn grid on, it's going to snap right back to where it relates to the world. So that means anything I cut with the grid, or anything I place rather with the grid on, is going to be parallel to the grid that I set up. So that's really powerful and something that actually a lot of other CNC machines struggle to do. Alignment is always hard. And Origin, in my experience with lots and lots of different CNC machines, is one of the easiest alignment setups. It really is quick. So that's cool. I'm going to go ahead and click place. And you can see now, this is anchored down, and this just looks like the tenon that should be on top of this board. It's perfect, right? And at this point, I am ready to go ahead and cut. So I'm going to swap on down into cut mode. One thing you should know is that anytime you create a shape with OnToolCAD, it's going to default to an inside cut. In this particular case, we want this to be an outside cut because it's a tenon. The only other thing that we want to take a look at here quickly is this spoil board on Workstation, making sure that the spoil board is the appropriate size. Let's go ahead and cut to the top camera, Eric. So this is the spoil board that I'm currently using, and Workstation comes with 4 of these MDF strips, and 2 of them at 25 millimeters thick, and 2 of them at 50 millimeters thick. And the setting on the front cutting or clamping face rather of Workstation is there's 3 settings on there. You can actually move physically the whole clamping face either up or down. So in this case, I have it set to the middle setting, and I'm going to put my spoil board in, and then I'm going to make sure that I don't cut any deeper than that 25 millimeter spoil board, because again, then I'm going to cut into aluminum, which I don't want to do. So in this particular case, I'm going to go ahead and cut down, just to illustrate this, I'm going to go ahead and cut down just to 3/4 of an inch, which is the extent of that this bit can cut, so that you guys can see that it really is capable of cutting a deep tenon. Especially if you want to cut deeper, you're going to want to get a bit that can cut deeper. But in this case, we'll go ahead and cut this tenon down to 3/4 of an inch. Does that sound good, Sean?
Yeah, that sounds great, and I'll kind of narrate the process because I think this is just something that people, may not understand how to, how do I cut straight to 3/4 inch? Do I do it with one pass? Do I have to do multiple
Totally.
passes? So,
Yeah.
as Noah mentioned kind of earlier, the standard depth you cut per pass is the diameter of the bit. That can change some, and Noah's cutting a hickory hardwood right now, so he's definitely, maybe on your first few cuts, start with some plywood or something softer. But, we're doing in 1/4 inch increments down to 3/4, and we're going to do a rough pass first. So we're going to have a small offset attached.
Which is here.
And then when we get towards the end, we'll change the offset to 0 and finish it up.
Yep. So right now, my cut settings are 1/4 inch depth, as Sean said, and then I'm 50 thousandths offset. You can see this little gap right here between the gray line and the green line. That's the offset. So I'm moving this away from its final size by a little bit, just to give myself some wiggle room and make the final result look cleaner and be a little bit more size accurate. So let's go ahead and get cutting.
And when you're starting out new, I typically like to start from the same spot every time. So I typically, like Noah, start in the bottom left of whatever shape I'm at. So that way it just becomes one of those things where your routine really builds that kind of ordinary action. And so, we did our first pass, we retract, we go down another 1/4 inch and plunge again. So now we're down at 1/2 inch, and you can kind of see the bit here starting to remove material in the bottom. Same thing, we're just going slow. Really a standard speed. If you're kind of unsure what the standard speeds are when you get started, you can press and hold the green button down, and that'll actually move the unit at a very specific speed. And that will help you get, it's kind of set up for the basic speeds of cutting plywood with a 1/4 inch bit. Obviously you can change that in the bottom left with the speeds option, but we're coming around the third pass here. So now we're 3/4 inch deep with offset still applied. And we're going to go around this one more time. And then the last pass, we're just going to change the offset to 0, and then we'll finish up. Okay, so now we go here. Now we just select the offset, set it to 0. And now you can kind of see in the UI how, now there's a tiny bit of space that the blue is going to start filling up. And when you're doing finish offsets, it's important to think about how much of the bit is loaded up, right? This can really determine your edge quality as well as how much the bit is interacting with the material. So think less % of the bit loaded, better cut, and that will kind of lead you through all your projects. Okay, so
All right.
let's let them see it, Noah.
Yeah. Let them have it. The world wants to see this, Sean. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut over to the detail camera here. You can see that I now have a beautiful tenon cut on the end of this piece of material. And you guys saw how quick that was to create. And the one thing that's really amazing here is that Workstation is so accurate in its setup that I can actually go ahead and go test this on what I'm working on. If it's still a little too snug, I can check it back up in Workstation using those 3 points. The bottom of the support bar is an end stop, and the 2 alignment pins here. And as long as I do those 3 points again, make sure that it's really snug against those and clamped well, I can come and take a little bit off of this guy and just get it the exact fit that I'm looking for. And you guys saw that's completely on tool. So actually, there's lots, like I mentioned, there's lots of furniture that can be made, and it doesn't have to be just squares. Like we have this other tenon and mortise set up over here. This is kind of a fun one where you see a circular through tenon, but you have the alignment of a square. And this is actually kind of a fun cheat because you can cut this tenon with the standard origin bit because each of these is only 3/4 inch deep. And because you're stepping off after 3/4 inch, you're not going to end up rubbing against the material. So that's really the deal here with these bits, is that it stops cutting at 3/4 inch rather. But if you move it out then it's not going to be rubbing up against that. It's going to be cutting another 3/4 of an inch. And same deal for the opposite on the mortise side. So that's kind of a fun way if you do a double-stepped shouldered tenon to get a little bit more mileage out of the standard cutter, that 3/4 of an inch deep cutter.
Yeah, and maybe important to kind of show quickly the 1/8 inch cutter, because there's a little bit of difference there.
Sure, totally. Yeah, the 1/8 inch cutter is a little different in that it is actually ground to have a 1/4 inch shaft to work with the standard collet that comes with Origin. And so that little trick, that won't work here, because you're going to end up potentially running into, you could figure out how to make it work if you did your math right. That one's just a little bit trickier because the diameter of the shank of the bit grows here. You can see there's that sort of gradual lead out that it grows into the shank size. So watch out for that. But yeah, it is kind of fun to play with. Just know that 3/4 of an inch isn't necessarily the end of the line. Okay.
Totally.
Sean, do you want to take over for a little bit and talk about some projects?
Yeah, so thanks for showing that, Noah.
Yeah,
let's jump back into the slides for a quick minute. Now, I really want to just go through quickly some of the software design, because people may be saying, how do I get my projects into Origin? So we already talked about using OnTool software. We talked a bit about Shaper Hub. We should quickly talk about Shaper Assist, but I'll do that in just a second. So if you go to the next slide. So one of the ones I wanted to start out talking with, this is the Candlestick Premium project. So about 6 months ago, I guess, we released Premium projects. This is a step-by-step walkthrough with how to create a really nice project without kind of knowing much about it. These are projects we sell. The Candlestick holder is a free project to get you kind of interested in understanding how they work. But you can see on the right here, they have a, each step has an illustration, and it has a bunch of settings for the cut, and it just walks you through the entire process. So, we have a bunch of different ones. We have some chairs, and we have a lamp. But the Candlestick is a really good one for new users to really understand. It was designed in a way to teach about offsets, teach about changing path types, as well as creating geometry in the thing. So, if we go over to my camera goose, if you start this project and you make 2 or 3 of them, you'll get that kind of experience learning how Origin's working. And by the time you finish 3 or 4 of these, you'll starting to get the main UI. So that's a good one to start on. But I would highly suggest checking that out. You just have to go to your Shaper Hub account online, and you'll see Premium projects on the front with the Candlestick. Okay, so back to the slides. And next slide. Another one to really check out is Shaper Hub. Shaper Hub, if you're not familiar, is kind of a community sharing site for projects, as well as a place to sync all the files that you care about to your tool. So you can upload your own files by clicking My Origin Files, kind of in that image there, and it'll take you to a page where you can upload your own files, and those files automatically get synced to Origin. As soon as you've uploaded it, they'll be available on Origin as long as you're connected to Wi-Fi. That allows you to manage your files and kind of recall them forever, basically. So, but one thing to note here is that you can upload projects for other people to use as well. So, if you have a project you like, or a file, maybe a sauce hinge in your workshop that you want to install, you don't need to go to a computer to build that. Just go to Shaper Hub. You can find the file most likely. We have about 900 projects now. Or you can upload and help create and give files for other people. So it's just kind of a place where you're going to congregate and find kind of a lot of the designs that you could go build yourself, but you may be able to find them online. Okay, so that's Shaper Hub. And keep going to the next slide. This is kind of a good one to see here, where once you're on a project, you click the blue button that says copy to my files, and it'll actually copy that project straight to the files. Like I said, it'll be on Origin, and you can just go cut, and you don't have to worry about the software design. Okay, and then next one is Shaper Assist. This is actually a service we offer where if you don't want to deal with building your own design files, you can sketch or send us a picture of something or a hardware insert and say, hey, I'd really like this file made. We will give you a quote for that. You can decide if you want to move forward, and then we'll just build the file for you, sync it to your tool, and you don't have to deal with computers at all. So this is a system that really works well. You can see more about this at assist.shapertools.com. Okay, and then next slide. Okay, so we talked about some of those ways to get in quickly. We're going to do a really fast dive into the file types Origin takes in case you are interested in building your own. There's a lot to cover here, so I'm going to kind of blow through it, but we have other sessions. Make sure you check out the playlist for that. So SVG, this is a type of file we import into Origin. It's a scalable vector graphics file. What that means is you can scale these files up and down, and they don't lose their proportion. So you can take that candlestick and scale it up large, and it'll still retain everything. Now this is pretty important because if we go to the next slide, you're going to see that these are the cuttable file types with Origin, and really they're mathematical models of objects. So SVG is the file that we support, but DXF, AI file, these are other types of vector file types, but you're going to have to convert them into SVGs to get them into Origin. Now, when you look at the corner of this wrench here, you're going to see it's a really crispy edge. And if we zoom in or zoom out, it's always going to say crispy. Now, if we go to the next one, you'll actually see that image files are not SVG files. So if you have an image of something you want to cut, you're not going to be able to load that into Origin. You can't take a picture of something, load it into Origin, and cut it. Looking at the corners here, it's blurry, it's little pixels, it's not a mathematical model. So if you're wondering why a JPEG image that you took and you try to upload it to your files isn't working, you really need to get it into an SVG file type, which is a mathematical formula. It's much different than a raster image like a JPEG or a PNG. So those are the basics of SVG files.
But just cutting back on Assist, if you are interested in converting an image to a cuttable file, that's actually a service that Assist handles almost every day. So if that's something you're not comfortable doing, but you have a picture or a drawing that you really want to be able to cut with Origin, just go ahead and use the Assist service. That's one of the kind of most awesome things that it's there to do is to help convert images into vector files.
Cool. Okay, and then move on from that. One more slide. Okay, here we go. So, there's multiple types of software you can use to get your files in. Here's some of the ones we recommend. We have some sessions on different ones of these. We have documents online that explain a little bit more. You're really in the 2D software camp or the 3D. If you're working on furniture, hardware, that kind of stuff, 3D is maybe your better option. If you're just doing text or shapes or that kind of thing, 2D can get you there. And some of the 2D can get you through the 3D stuff. We have a session where I kind of create a step stool with 2D software that is a 3D design, but take a look if you want to see more on that. But if you're going to build your own, you're going to have to pick one of these softwares or another one and start learning it so you can design your shapes in the computer and get them over to Origin. Okay, so that is kind of the basics of software. There's a lot more to go over, but before we go, and I know we're a little bit late, but there's a lot to teach people. I want to go over some tips and tricks. So Noah, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot here, but I have a couple written down here, and I want to just go over a few of them. So
hit me.
One of them that I want to start with is, first thing you get Origin, it's like, how do I hold it? I think there's some really key points about, some people put their hands all the way around the grips, and that can kind of create a bit of a questionable way of holding it. And I think there's a better way to hold it where you're kind of grounding yourself to the workpiece. So maybe just a quick show.
Yeah, Goose, if you cut over to my benchtop camera here, sorry, the benchtop. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that Origin's handles are actually end up landing fairly close to the work surface, and that's something that's actually pretty intentional. A lot of people think that you should be holding Origin like this with the handles, and really, applying a lot of downward pressure most of the time, that's not really what you want to be doing, because that doesn't allow you to really have good fine control over what you're doing. What we find to be the best way to use origin in most instances, most especially if you're doing kind of fine detail work or coming around the corner on, say, a rectangle, is to actually plant the palm of your hand down on the work surface and hold origin like this. And so that means that you've got this kind of friction area on the palm of your hand, and you can control how much friction you have by squeezing or letting loose on the handles, and that can be really helpful. It helps to control the machine going around corners, which is kind of the more risky spot with a router. Changing direction, especially very, very sudden changes in direction, routers don't like. They like gradual changes, so holding onto the handle in sort of different ways to achieve different things is important. And then just in general, body position is really important with routers. Oftentimes I like to keep my kind of arms locked into my sides, even my elbows kind of tucked in if I'm working on something that's really, really trying to move some material, and actually just shift. I know it's a little funny, but shift my hips and my knees, and actually it's surprising how well that works. You're really using the center of your gravity, the mass of your body, to move origin around rather than trying to muscle it with your arms. The other thing that really helps with is fatigue. So if you're going to be in for a long session, you're making a lot of furniture, conserve energy, work smart there, and tuck your arms in and just go ahead and use your kind of body weight and your center of mass to move origin around.
Cool. No, that's a great tip. And kind of related to that, one other one that we should go over is, one of the things that you're going to end up doing is cutting a circle and wanting to remove all the material on the inside. And sometimes when you're new, you'll get bottoms of the pocket that aren't really flat. You'll see the bit going through it. So maybe you can go over that.
Totally. Yeah. So that's the only situation actually where you do want to apply a little bit of pressure to the handle. So if we cut back to the bench, applying pressure down through the handle into the base of origin is one of the most reliable ways to get a really flat, nice-looking pocket floor. The reason for that is that origin is riding on the surface of material here, and if there are kind of little steps or little bumps in the material, you really want to try and sort of keep a really consistent amount of pressure downwards, and that's going to load the base up of origin such that you get a more consistent pocket. If you're kind of holding it loosely and letting it just sort of bounce around on the surface, you're going to see that in the bottom of the pocket, because it's really amazing how visible even just kind of a small change in height becomes. And you're never going to fully remove the witness marks at the bottom of a pocket, even on a regular CNC machine. Those are really hard to get rid of just with the machine. It's going to require some kind of finishing work after the fact, sanding with detail sanders. If you have, I'm going to space on the name of it now, but the pocketing plane, you can clean the bottom of a pocket out with that as a potential way to flatten things out. But yeah, normally if you apply a reasonable amount of pressure, I'm not talking about trying to put your whole body's weight in, but if you're applying a good amount of pressure downwards and moving around inside your pocket, that should do it. And I can also just go ahead and go through a little bit of pocketing here, Sean, if we want to.
Yeah, maybe let's do a quick pocket on that, because it is kind of a unique situation.
So if we switch over to the screen, I've got my cut type window open here, or the menu rather, and I'm going to click on pocket. And what that's going to do is set up the whole inside of this shape as a cuttable area. So I probably won't get to cutting all of it because it's quite big and we don't want to waste everyone's time. But I'll just cut a little bit of it and you guys can see how pocket works. And Sean, if you want to talk through while I'm cutting.
Sure. Yeah, so, it really depends where you want to start and finish in pocketing. pocketing is kind of a free-form operation. So if you're more comfortable starting on the outside, working your way to the inside, that's up to you. You control how much of the bit is loaded up. You control how you move it. So there is some, depending on what you're cutting and how deep, there are some things where you're really gonna want to work in a counterclockwise motion, or clockwise motion, and making sure that the bit is loaded up on the right side. For small projects like this where you're not going very aggressive, just normal stuff, you can kind of cut back and forth, but note that it's going to feel different going one way to the other. So one of my preferred methods is starting in the middle of the pocket and then going clockwise and making the circle bigger and bigger and bigger until you finish the shape. Now normally we'll pocket in the beginning and then go back and do an inside cut, and if you saw there, Noah's just like kind of leaving the pocket, showing you that all the correction, there's no correction in the pocket unless you leave the pocket. And once you leave it, Origin will know, and it will say, hey, we're not going to let you ruin the shape, so we're going to retract. Yeah, so here you can see there's a few, that's the part he removed. It's up to you how much you want to remove, but ideally you would remove it all, then change the cut type from pocket to inside, and then you would finish the shape. So pocket actually leaves a little bit of space on the outside so that you can change to an inside shape and finish it. Yeah, right there. Okay, so that's good. Thank you for that, Noah. I think we talked a little bit about it, but as a new user, you might be wondering, am I moving this thing correctly? Like Noah said at the beginning, just start by thinking about consistent, smooth movements while you're moving it. Don't try to do jerks. Really try to think about it. If you're an old school router person, you'll know slow and steady and consistent is the way to do it. So, all right. So one that I do want to get into, because this is a bit of a confusing for some people, is the kind of image alignment in the scan. So we showed you how we made a grid on the tenon so we could place a thing on it. You might say, hey, well, can't I just use the image and place a square right on top of it? In this case, no. You really want to use the grid. The image is going to get you very close, but in the types of tolerances you're looking for in tenons, you really want to make a grid. Don't trust the image in that situation, and you'll be fine. So the last thing I think we should go over, Noah, is some Z-touch failures. So every time you change a bit, you're going to have to do the Z-touch, and especially in Workstation, this can be a bit of a problem. So maybe, Noah, you can set up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And explain that.
I'm going to set myself up to fail here. Okay.
Yes.
So if we want to go ahead and let's see here, what's the best way to take a look at this? Maybe take a look from the top view, Eric. So I have Origin set up kind of a little bit askew, and you can see that it's not really it's not square to the workstation, and then the support bar is out quite far. And if we cut to the screen and go into cut mode here, I am going to attempt to Z-touch, but the machine is actually going to fail, or at least it should here. Yeah. So it's going to fail because, well, two reasons here, actually. Well, we'll talk about it here in a second. But I'm going to Z-touch here, and Origin's going to try really hard to Z-touch, but it's not going to be able to do it. Okay, so you can see it says Z-touch failed. Make sure Origin's base is on a single uniform surface and try again. Okay, so that can be a little confusing with Workstation because Workstation is not a single uniform surface, and you can set Workstation up in such a way that you can Z-touch onto something. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and clamp our tenon board or tenon piece back in. Remember, there's that 3-point setup to make sure it's good and snug in there. Okay, and I'm going to take my support bar, and I'm going to set it up, like I said, with enough distance between right in here where my finger is, enough distance that I can kind of slip a finger in there, maybe double my finger, just something that you are comfortable with so that you know that your bit is not going to run into that. And with offsets especially, you can kind of forget what's going on and easily run your bit into things. So I like to give myself some extra wiggle room there. So now, if we take a look here actually at the bench camera, this is sort of getting at the real meat of the issue here. So this guy right here is the sensor that makes Z-Touch go. It's this little bar on the bottom of Origin. And normally that's just riding happily on a piece of plywood or whatever you're working on. But if this bar isn't on a surface, the surface that any surface really, not necessarily the surface you're touching off on, this bar isn't on that surface, touch off is not going to work. So this bar has to be in contact with what you're working on. And so in the case of the workstation over here, the support bar is going to act as that contact point. So we go back to my top view, maybe Eric. You can see now workstation's relatively in alignment with the support bar, and I can actually line up with what I see now is the top of my tenon, and if I go to Z-Touch, it's going to be successful. And that's because both I have something to touch off on, so the top of my tenon, and the bit is sort of aimed somewhere in that area, and my touch sensor is on the support bar. It's also okay in this particular case with Workstation to just go ahead and move, if you go back to the top view, Eric, move Origin onto just the shaper tape area of Workstation. As long as shaper tape is in view, Workstation will be able to touch off. So I can, again, go to tap on Z-Touch, and Z-Touch is successful there. And because we use the support bar to set the tenon up, I know that that top surface of the tenon is matching to the top surface of Workstation, so I'm not super concerned about differences in height there. However, it is possible to touch off on something that's lower than the surface that you're working on, and sometimes that's an advantage. Sometimes you want to be able to cut relative to some difference in height, and you can do that. Just be aware that if you touch off lower than the surface of Origin, you run the risk of the tool thinking it's okay to leave the bit potentially a little bit proud. And I think that's only the case, it generally fully retracts, that's only the case if you were to extend the bit out beyond the base of Origin, which it is possible to do, but I'd say that's fairly advanced. So don't try that till you're feeling comfy with the basics.
Yep, thank you. All right, so back to the slides one time, Goose, and one last thing I want to go over. I think those were some pretty good tips, especially for new users, and hopefully that saves you some time when you get down in the shop. Okay, like we said, we have a lot of videos online, a lot of support, support.shapertools.com, as well as our tutorials page. I probably should also put on the slide that we now have a huge slew of sessions videos going over very specific details. So, if you have questions, let us know, or always check out these, and we probably have videos on all the things you're wondering anyways. And last but not least, if you're on Instagram or other social media, show us your projects getting started, your unboxing with the hashtag ShaperMade. And if you're new to the world of Shaper, we have a great community where everyone will work together, help you see all the things you might not be able to see. So if you have questions, that's a great place to post, and you'll definitely get some help. So with that, I think that's going to wrap up today's session. Have a good weekend.
Yeah. Take care, everybody.